Men are taught to be strong, to handle things,
to not burden others with their problems.
so he does exactly that. He handles it.
He carries it alone. He doesn't complain, doesn't ask for help, doesn't admit when he's drowning. And the reward for all that strength? A loneliness so deep he doesn't even have the words to describe it. Because he was never taught those words. He sits in his car for 10 minutes before going inside. Not because he doesn't want to go home, but because he needs a moment to transition. To shift from whatever he was dealing with all day to the version of himself his family expects. The provider. The stable one. The one who has answers. He takes a breath, puts on the face, and walks through the door. Nobody asks how his day really was. And if they did, he wouldn't know where to start. His friendships exist on the surface. They watch games together, grab drinks occasionally, text when something funny happens. But when something breaks inside him, when the weight gets too heavy or the questions get too loud, he doesn't reach out. Not because they wouldn't listen, but because he doesn't know how to say it. The language of vulnerability wasn't part of his education. He learned how to fix things, how to solve problems, how to push through. He never learned how to say I'm struggling and actually mean it. This is the loneliness that lives in silence. It's not about being physically alone. It's about being surrounded by people who know your routines but not your thoughts. Who see your actions but not your fears. Who depend on your strength but never witness your exhaustion. It's the isolation that comes from playing a role so well that you forget there's supposed to be something underneath it. He wakes up at the same time every day. Goes to work. Does what needs to be done. Comes home. Repeats. The structure keeps him moving, but it doesn't keep him connected. Somewhere in the routine, he lost the ability to reach out. Or maybe he never had it. Maybe that was something boys weren't supposed to develop, so it atrophied before it could grow. His partner asks if something's wrong. He says no. Because what would he even say? That he feels disconnected? That the life he built feels hollow sometimes? That he's not sure who he is beyond the roles he performs? Those thoughts exist in a language he doesn't speak. So he says he's fine, and she believes him because he's always fine. And in that moment, the distance between them grows a little wider. At work, he's the guy people come to when things need fixing. He's reliable. Competent. Doesn't get emotional about problems. Just handles them. And he's proud of that. Except the cost of being that person is that nobody asks if he needs anything. They assume he's solid. That nothing shakes him. That he's got it figured out. And he lets them assume it because correcting them would mean admitting otherwise. And admitting otherwise feels like failing. Men learn early that emotions are a liability. That expressing fear makes you weak. That asking for help means you couldn't handle it yourself. So they stop asking. They stop expressing. They stop admitting that sometimes the weight is too much. And over time, that silence becomes so normal that breaking it feels impossible. He scrolls through his phone and realizes he doesn't have anyone he could call right now. Not for the real stuff. Not for the I don't know if I'm okay conversation. He has people he knows, sure. People he sees regularly. But intimacy? Actual connection? That requires a level of openness he was taught to avoid. So he puts the phone down and carries it alone. Again. The loneliness sits differently for men. It's not always obvious. It doesn't always look like isolation. Sometimes it looks like being the strong one. The dependable one. The one who never cracks. But behind that exterior is someone who hasn't been asked how he really feels in years. Someone who stopped volunteering that information because it was never received well when he did. He remembers being younger and having closer friendships. Before life got complicated. Before everyone got busy. Before the unspoken rules about masculinity became rigid. Back then, conversations went deeper. Vulnerability was easier. But at some point, that shifted. Emotional honesty became awkward. Checking in became performative. And the friendships that remained stayed surface level because going deeper felt uncomfortable for everyone involved. The problem isn't that men don't feel loneliness. It's that they don't have permission to name it. Admitting you're lonely as a man feels like admitting you failed at something basic. Like you couldn't maintain relationships, or you're too needy, or you're not self-sufficient enough. So the loneliness gets reframed. It's not loneliness, it's just being busy. It's not isolation, it's just being independent. The labels change, but the feeling stays the same. He watches other men and wonders if they feel it too. If the guy at the gym who always seems focused is actually just avoiding going home to an empty apartment. If his coworker who works late every night is chasing a promotion or running from something he can't name. If the friend who always cracks jokes is using humor to deflect from the fact that he's barely holding it together. But he doesn't ask. Because asking would require him to admit he relates. And that admission feels too vulnerable. The irony is brutal. Men are socialized to be protectors, providers, problem solvers. But the very traits that make them good at those roles also isolate them. Being strong means not showing weakness. Being dependable means not needing support. Being the rock means never admitting when you're crumbling. And the result is a generation of men who are functional but disconnected. Present but unreachable. Surrounded but alone. He's not depressed in a clinical sense. At least, he doesn't think so. He still gets up. Still goes through the motions. Still fulfills his responsibilities. But there's a numbness to it. A sense that he's living his life from a distance. Going through the script without feeling the scenes. And that numbness is easier than confronting what's underneath it, which is a loneliness so profound it makes his chest tight when he lets himself acknowledge it. The worst part is that he knows it's his own doing. He's the one who doesn't reach out. He's the one who deflects when conversations get real. He's the one who keeps people at arm's length while simultaneously resenting the distance. But changing that pattern feels impossible. Because it would require dismantling the entire framework of how he's supposed to exist as a man. And he's not sure what would be left if he did that. What he doesn't realize yet is that strength was never supposed to mean isolation. That being a man doesn't require emotional silence. That vulnerability isn't weakness, it's the foundation of actual connection. But realizing that intellectually and feeling it in practice are two different things. And unlearning decades of conditioning doesn't happen overnight. Some men hit a breaking point. A moment where the loneliness becomes so loud they can't ignore it anymore. For some, it's a health scare. For others, it's a relationship ending. Sometimes it's just waking up one day and realizing they don't actually know themselves outside of the roles they play. And in that moment, the choice becomes clear. Keep carrying it alone or risk being honest about the weight. He starts small. He texts a friend something real. Not a joke. Not a meme. Just a simple "I've been struggling lately." The response takes a few minutes, and in those minutes, he regrets sending it. But when the reply comes, it's not judgment. It's relief. Me too, man. Me too. And suddenly, the loneliness cracks a little. Not because the problem is solved, but because he's not the only one carrying it anymore. The shift doesn't happen all at once. It happens in small moments. In admitting when he doesn't have the answer. In saying "I'm not okay" when someone asks instead of defaulting to "fine." In letting people see the version of him that isn't performing or fixing or providing. In realizing that the people who matter don't need him to be invincible. They need him to be real. The loneliness men don't talk about is common. It's structural. It's the result of a system that taught boys to suppress instead of express. To endure instead of connect. To prove their worth through independence rather than relationships. And breaking that pattern doesn't make you less of a man. It makes you human. He's still figuring it out. The path isn't linear. Some days he defaults back to the old pattern. Some days he can't find the words even when he wants to. But he's learning that loneliness doesn't mean you're alone. It means you haven't let anyone in. And letting people in requires courage that looks nothing like the strength he was taught to value. You don't fix loneliness by being tougher. You fix it by being honest. By admitting you need connection, not just company. By understanding that isolation isn't independence. And by recognizing that the bravest thing a man can do isn't carrying everything alone. It's admitting he doesn't have to. This is the loneliness men don't talk about. But maybe it's time they did.